Jim Joyce. I've never seen you in glasses, man. I don't
Yeah,
think
and
so.
a little looking, trying to get a little academic here. I'm going into my next fundraising round. I want to
You
seem
want to look
responsible.
smarter than you actually are. That's pretty smart. That's pretty smart. I
Exactly,
like it.
exactly.
And looks like the scenery has also changed. So you're back.
Yep, I'm back. I've made it back to Dublin. I'm back at home. Just saw my family after being on the road for a month.
Right.
So I forgot the alarm to the house when I came in the door. Set it off.
And
My dog
all
remembered me.
and all jabbed up. Did you play the music walking in before you walked
Oh,
in? Of
yeah. Well, like I said, I set the alarm off, so I was it was blaring.
that was it.
So an appropriate entrance there. But my entrance songs are. I've been playing the entrance songs from abroad, so I've been playing it at night for dinner. I've been activating the Alexa from the
Not
US.
nice, nice.
So
What else? Before we our guest, I've been actually very like excited to have her on. But before we do, I just want
great.
to give a huge shout out to our biggest fans. One of Matthew
Yeah.
Holt and Just DaMassa, 200 episode.
200. Yeah.
That's crazy. I think they said I've been doing this for 3 years. I will pat myself on the back. I now have the largest number of takeovers on that show. You and I had one of them when they sort of
Right.
took over
Right.
hours, but that was
Did
kind of
you take
fun.
over the 200th? You took over the 200th episode.
Well, not completely. So it was
Okay.
me, Glenn Tillman, Lisa
Okay.
Suennen, and Ian Morrison, who apparently was Matthew Holt's old boss and mentor.
Okay.
I don't know how it's like to manage Matthew Holt, but Norton. So anyway, let's let her in because I have a feling, we'll have enough time.
She's gonna
Hopefully,
kind of light up our Wednesday.
we're hoping to be the
Right.
vampires today, right?
Hi,
Well,
Hi, Alexandra.
now we can see you.
how's it going?
Nice
So
to meet
first of
you.
all, meet Jim.
Hi, Jim. I think we've met
Alex.
before, Jim.
Yeah, I'm thinking we'd have too. I was actually just listening to you on your TED Med talk the other day, and I'm like, I definitely know her. But as I get older and as I move on in years, go in and
Yeah.
out.
Well, and I
This
think
is so amazing.
this is so
And-
fun. How are you? You and your woman are doing the most amazing things. Oh my God, I had so much fun, like creeping all over it today. Big heart. Yes. And Jim, I checked you out too. Had a free time and I was like, oh my God, what are these guys doing right now? Because Eugene, I haven't talked to you in forever. Oh my gosh.
I know. Well, we are meticulously unproduced, but never completely unprepared. So, which is great.
Right.
And by the way, I don't know if you peeked at any of the other episodes. I usually drink whiskey, but today, just for your sake, I decided to be, a little more elegant. So I have a vermouth going on tonight. So that's it. What are you drinking, Jim?
Okay, so you're in Barcelona, and Jim, you are in Ireland?
In Dublin. I'm just back after a month abroad. I went over to the States to get my shots and my check in with the family and everything else like that. So I just got back. I'm back
This
4 hours.
this morning. This guy's hanging out with us, Alex.
Well,
But-
so when I looked at this, because you're from someplace more local to me. I'm Beverly. I'm Boston. So
Okay. Yeah. I grew up Needham, Massachusetts,
Yeah.
and that's where I spent the first part, and kind of then New York and then Dublin, last
Yeah.
20 years.
Well, it makes me so happy. And Eugene, I always think about Health 2.0 whenever I think about, the dawn of what I would call digital health to me happened in many ways there at Health 2.0, right? It was all of us
Yeah.
weird people kind of found each other and began to cultivate these things that now are sort of the norm, right? Like every other industry in the world is trying to run in and do it.
I have to tell you, Alex, my sort of you impacted my public speaking abilities tremendously. And to this day, actually use you as an example to Marina. And the reason, I remember being backstage, right? You were about to go on, and I'm going either after you or a couple of people behind you. And I see you sort of, and I hope you don't mind, but I know you're a very open person. You're just pacing, right? And you're sort of in your own head. And I actually remember coming up to you and saying, are you okay? It's like, oh yeah, that's what I do, or something similar to that.
Right.
And so
Right.
as put together and as eloquent you are, Alex, on stage, we all go through these, moments prior to stepping on. And so,
Oh, well, and I would even say, I feel this so strongly. I am almost always about to throw up, definitely sweating, like often full on, please tell your beautiful woman, beads of sweat going down my back, no matter what, and it doesn't get easier. And what I say this all the time. To me, if there's a moment that I don't feel that way, then I need to stop, because
Yeah.
what I carry in my bones is like, God, how lucky are we to have this moment to try and interact with anybody, whether it's on the street or it's in a meeting, or heaven forbid, lucky enough to be at a conference with a
Right.
group of folks, to try and, like, I'll always say to myself, what do I want this audience to feel after? And what do I hope they start doing differently immediately? And if I die tomorrow, and this is the last thing I ever say, what is it? Because what the three of us are working on, it matters so much, so much.
Yep.
And we just can't take it seriously enough. That doesn't mean you should be anxious. It just means you should be respectful of the
Right.
great, honor you have in speaking to people about what we're lucky enough to get to do.
And do you have a little
wait.
routine? I know you pace, but do you start, like, when you're giving your talk, do you have like a little like routine that kind of gets you into zone, or like give me that like initial experience?
So there's probably two things I do. One is, and Eugene has seen this for years, I prepare. I don't think and I'm so stressed out. And everyone's like, why are you preparing so much? Because it's a great honor, because it really matters. Yep. And because I want, if this is, especially if you're moderating, like, I think that the most important thing you do is support the event, you support the audience, you support whoever you're interviewing or whatever you're doing. So number one, prepare. You can't prepare enough. And then number two, I think humility is key. I'm a humongous believer. Like, I know if I watch somebody take the stage and they start talking about how awesome they are, immediately I start to feel badly about myself instantaneously. I'm like, I'm not so awesome. Why are they so awesome? And then I kind of can feel a little bit 12-ish. I'm 12 in my soul sometimes. And I'm like, no, I hope you fall off the stage since you're so awesome. So I try and share more about the things that are not working. I try and be the most transparent about the stuff I'm doing that sucks and where I'm feeling insecure or anxious. And I find in doing that, I sort of take away anybody's ability, I hope, to laugh at me, because I'm owning up front, I'm afraid you're laughing at me. I'm afraid you don't take what I'm doing seriously. So if you are doing that, that's okay. I've said it out loud. Now we can move on to the business at hand. And so I sort of go through those stages.
Love it.
And Jim, now that you watched the TED Talk or any other, I mean, I haven't rewatched Alex because I've seen her live, but I mean, she's amazing. So,
yep.
But we're like 10 minutes into it, and our millions of listeners and viewers don't know who you are. So maybe just like a little brief intro, and then we dive right
millions. So I think the best way to describe it very, very quickly, and you can see behind me, Eugene, you will love this.
Yeah,
and Jim,
I already have millions of questions on that alone. So we're not. Well, I think we're gonna pull a Tim Harris today, Jim. I hope you have time. Like, do 2 hours now.
Let's go. So I think the easiest way to describe very, very quickly, and then I want to go, Eugene and I were texting and whatever-ing each other back and forth, and I think we should call this love and scars, right? Like, what do we want to be together today? We want to like spread the love, show our scars so that other people can learn, feel less alone. And where my first real aha moment in the healthcare space was working at Eliza and having the enormous privilege of sitting on top of genuinely what we would now call a population health omni-channel communication platform. But what it enabled us to do, we had the first ever patent on using speech recognition in an outbound calling capacity. And we did that because most people using speech recognition were using it for inbound. And inbound is people who are calling in because they have something that they want to accomplish or something that they know a conversation they're about to have.
Yeah.
So that's a different speech recognition challenge than if we are calling outbound to people, number one. Number two, if I think about the people in the healthcare space that we're all trying to serve, it's not the ones who are already engaged. If you're engaged, gosh, that's fantastic. Yep. Yay, good for you. I'm worried about the people who are not engaged, who we can't find. And so when we used outbound calling, we were getting to the folks who had not done whatever they were supposed to do, called into the healthcare system, gone to have the visit, picked up the medication, whatever it might be. And what we learned over the course of what, by the time I left Eliza, we had done over 1 billion interactions with people about their health, was when you actually got one of these souls, these beautiful souls on the phone, what they wanted to talk about was not their diabetes, their cardiovascular disease, whether or not they should get a mammogram. It was very clearly, very plainly data supported caregiver stress, financial stress, relationship stress, and workplace stress. And that wasn't our invention. That was, if you listen to people in the wild and you don't project onto them what they care about, you really, you don't even ask any questions, you just listen to what they're saying. That's what they're going to talk about. You know, my mom with Alzheimer's, she just moved in. I'm not having sex anymore. I hate my boss so much I can't breathe. I'm pretty sure one of my kids is on drugs, right? Real fears and pains and vulnerabilities. And we thought, well, maybe that's actually, maybe those are really the biggest diseases in the US. And that launched the Unmentionables. I love you, Matthew Holt, for being bold enough and brave enough and unorthodox enough to really give us a stage to talk about the Unmentionables year after year. And we built, with the help of Wendy Lynch, we built lots and lots of data to actually prove that these are conditions. And the presence and magnitude of these unmentionables or life sucks disease factors, or now we would call them social determinants of health. If you measure that against your personal balance of positive and negative coping factors, you get measurable top and bottom line impact. So that was sort of the aha of Eliza. In parallel to that, we lost my beautiful, beautiful sister-in-law to brain cancer. She was diagnosed the night I got hitched to her brother, and she died 7 months later. Textbook case of overtreatment. And love again to Matthew Holt. I love you. Because once again, way before, this is 2008, way before, and the Unmentionables started in 2010, 2008, before anybody was talking about death or giving death a stage.
The one slide.
Right?
The one slide
project, Engage with Grace. How do we have these, how do we normalize, destigmatize, and have these conversations about how to live our very best days until our last, way before we have to? And so when we left Eliza, we looked at the overlap between those two, and it was the unpaid caregiver, right? If we want to sustainably, scalably bend trend, reduce costs, more importantly, improve quality, make people's days better, their lives better, we've got to focus on that unpaid caregiver. And that's sort of the arc.
So I remember, and you did say, I think in your bio somewhere it says 5-time entrepreneur, but the one thing that I remember hearing at one of the JPMs was Alex went to Walmart and is talking to people in the front lines. You know, I would love to dig into sort of, you know, what was the aha moment to say, you know what, I'm going to go drop everything and talk to these hundreds of people per day, or, you know, would love to hear a little bit about your experience there.
That is probably like, you know, Eliza's insights, Engage with Grace insights, and in Walmart is probably the top of all of them. But why we did that is because when we went to start Archangels Take One, which was a movement to really get these unpaid caregivers, invisible heroes, unsung heroes recognized, we tried to roll that movement out, and it was a funky idea. And you don't roll funky ideas that are ahead of their time out with health plans, do you? No, but I forgot that. And so we try to do something.
That's good that you have a short-term memory, right? Like,
exactly.
It's good,
like,
you know,
scar. So that was a big fail. So the best way I can describe it is, and you know, my co-founder in that is Sarah Stevens-Winay, who is my co-founder in Archangels Take Two. We have an incredible team now. But she took that after that, we were like, this just isn't working. We were bootstrapped. You can't lie to yourself when you're bootstrapped, right? There's no $20 million. Back then it would have been like $5 million in the bank. Now it'd be like $100 million in the bank, but there's nothing in the bank. People are paying, but they're not. And she went to work at Aetna because we were really curious. When we leave as a startup, when we leave the room, what do people say? Do they say those entrepreneurs are crazy? Like, are they smarter than us? Do they really know what it should cost? Like, what are they saying? So she went to find that out. And I had what can only be considered a midlife crisis, and felt like I live in a bubble.
I'm almost there.
Maybe. Once you've had it and you acknowledge you're having it, you realize we should have one once a year, because it's basically like a come to Jesus meeting with yourself. Yeah. It's what much of the country has had since COVID. It's like facing death. It's a moment of what really matters to me and what is true and who am I? And, you know, if I were to die tomorrow, what do I want to do? And I had this self epiphany that I really lived in a bubble, and that I was spending my time, you know, traveling around, talking on stages about this population that I so wanted to serve, which is these folks who are being tortured by these things. And meanwhile, from a Maslow's hierarchy perspective, you know, the basics were good for me. And I wasn't worried about transportation, safety, food, right?
Yep.
Right.
A house over my head. And that's very unusual and very privileged. And I didn't want to be always looking at things from that perspective. And I read a lot of studies. Everybody reads a lot of studies. So what? Yep. So I thought I want to go work at Walmart. And you guys will both appreciate this because you probably know Marcus Osborne, right? Do you know Marcus Osborne?
I actually don't.
Okay, so Marcus now is doing the Walmart health effort. Marcus has been, when Eliza was very early on, because I love Walmart, obviously. I love Walmart because 50% of the US before COVID goes through Walmart every week. 50%, 95% at least once a year. I love Marcus because he was, when we were at Eliza, he was our key contact. And because he carried with him the absolute raw, authentic perspective, not on what do we talk about in the boardroom, what looks pretty on a whiteboard, but what plays out for real people out in the wild. He would always give us good feedback. And the first time he ever liked anything we were doing was when we talked about the Unmentionables. So I called Marcus and said, leaving Eliza, building on the Unmentionables, I feel like I live in a bubble. Hey, Marcus, you're a Walmart executive. I want to be a Walmart cashier. Will you get me a job? And there was like this long pause. And then he started crying with laughter. He said, did you just hear yourself? I'm like, yeah, Marcus, get me a job. And he said, you just said, hey, Walmart executive, I live in a bubble, get me a job. He said, get your own mother effing job. And he hung up the phone. And I was like, I don't know how to get a job. And that was the whole point. So that's sort of began.
Do you ever watch Larry David? This reminds me when Larry David went to work at a dealership a bit, and like everybody was just like, why are you doing this? What?
Yeah. And it's what I'll tell you that's amazing. A couple epiphanies within the first 3 days. One is we are all way more.
Wait, how did you get the job?
So I sat and sweat. I don't have a sweating problem, but many of my stories resolve on being panicky. Or maybe I do have a sweating problem, but I sweat champagne, Eugene, though, just so you know. But I literally like sat in my office for 3 weeks straight trying to get up the courage to apply online for a job at the Walmart that was closest to me, store 2660. I love you, store 2660. North Reading.
In Massachusetts, or?
In North Reading, Massachusetts.
Okay.
And I didn't know how to do it. I had never applied for a job online before. And I just kept waiting until finally one day I did it. And for any of us who've never done that before, it was scary because I was trying to outthink whether or not I was answering correctly. Sure. And all I kept thinking in my head is like, what if English was not my first language? And a lot of the questions were double negatives. And how would I be answering? And am I answering correctly? Got a job interview with Susan West, who now moonlights with us at Archangels. And, you know, again, like experience after experience, like the first day, when was the last time you sat outside a room full of people and nobody knew you and nobody liked you and nobody cared and you were like trying to figure out where to sit at a table, right? You know that feeling, like 8th grade feeling? That was all my Walmart feeling in the beginning.
Well, you're saying last week, Eugene? Or
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, so yes, in our healthcare conferences. But Eugene, the second you sit down, someone's like, what do you do? And you tell them and you're like, oh, I love you. Yeah. Nobody cares about what I was talking about.
But Alexandra, just to give me some context here. So you grew, like, in, not to click way back, but you grew up in Massachusetts. You're a Massachusetts, and then you had started off. You didn't come from healthcare, but you would come as an executive, or you when you did your first ELIZA company, you.
Yeah. So my dad is a serial entrepreneur. He was he was in the first angel investing groups ever, called the Breakfast Club, that was founded here in Boston.
Okay.
And so I grew up in a startup environment, in a bootstrapping, this is what you do what you believe in. The difference between angel investing, I will argue, and other types of investing is angels, they want to do it themselves. They just don't have the time or energy anymore, but they would. Right. They care so much, they can't let it die. And watching my dad support all these baby companies on the things that he believed in was amazing. When I got out, and I worked with him through the years, when I got out of college, what I really wanted to do was go work in technology. I wanted to work with Danny Hillis at Thinking Machines, because I was obsessed with massively parallel processing supercomputers, because they mimic the way the brain works. But my dad and other smart people, my parents, other people said, you know that space. You don't have the right to choose that yet. Go do something else. So I went to be a strategy consultant, and my first case I got assigned at CDI, which became Oliver Wyman, was in healthcare. And I was distraught. I went home. In the old days, you had to, like, pick up an old phone, call my mom, and I was like, this is terrible. I hate healthcare is so boring. Like, I don't want to work in healthcare. I want to work in retail, travel, automotive, banking. And probably, again, within 3 days, I obviously have like a 3-day half-life. I was like, I will never leave healthcare, because healthcare is humanity. Healthcare is people. Healthcare is stories. Healthcare is love. Healthcare is passion. It's loss. It's fear. It's community, right?
So then you went in, then from there, you went in and set up ELIZA, right?
So did ELIZA for 2 years, did CDI for 2 years, left to go start my first startup, which was like, I won't get into it. Left that to do second startup, left that to go do ELIZA.
ELIZA, okay. Okay, yeah. So you're like,
and then more in between.
And then Archangel, so you're like multiple startups, come from a family, obviously blown away by the healthcare, and then you had an epiphany and said, I want to be a Walmart cashier. So I just want to get the context here. Yes, like, so now I need to apply for a job as a Walmart cashier. I love it. So
going through and realizing before Walmart, that realization that we have to expand the definition of health to include life. When life goes wrong, health goes wrong.
Yep.
And really this broader notion, like, we have to get outside these silos and traditional definitions. And what Walmart really taught me was, the best way I can describe it is this: there's retail, there's financial services, there's healthcare. In the eyes of a human, there's just life. So we're the only ones, we, from an industry corporate perspective, are the only people who are like, I work in healthcare, I work in financial services, I work in entertainment. The rest of the world just wakes up, and from the second they open their eyes, they're stressed out or panicking, most likely, hopefully not, about something, right? I'm worried about my kids. I'm, my mom just moved in, I'm worried about money, whatever it might be. And you see that play out over and over again in Walmart.
The only hour that I don't worry about anything is this hour. And the only thing I do get stressed out is if the guest is going to be on time, because I don't want to edit this shit. So
Eugene, I was so afraid I was going to be late. You were like, don't you be late. And I was like, I was coming from another meeting. I was like, trying to dial in, my computer froze.
Yeah. And you get stressed out that I'm not going to show up. Or
yeah, honestly, less so. You're pretty reliable at this point after 5 seasons. So
okay, so I want to go into like, so you wanted to, so you had done all these amazing things, set up these companies, passionate about healthcare, and you wanted to break out of your own personal kind of psychology and bubble, as you describe it, and just do something completely, kind of transformative to like your perspective. Was that it or no?
It was an act of desperation. It was who am I? What am I doing? I think I'm full of shit. I don't actually know what I'm talking about. How can I have any idea about these things I'm talking about when the only people I hang out with, this was during the election. It was 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. It was during the last election, before this most recent election. And that people were at each other's throats. And, you know, I moved in a circle where a lot of people felt a certain way. And I kept saying to myself, I just don't believe that 50% of the country is wrong. I want to better understand why do you see this and you see that?
Okay.
And literally being at Walmart, probably like day 7, long enough to already, I fall in love very quickly. Already like loved one of my coworkers. This is probably like week 4, actually, to be fair. And we got into a big old fight. When you're a cashier, one of the things you do if no one's in your line is you like tidy up, you know, make sure that chocolate bars are in the right place. And we were doing that next to each other. And he wanted to vote for somebody different than I wanted to vote for.
Okay.
And the language that he used, if I'd ever heard that in any other setting from somebody, I would think, up yours. Instead, I was like, okay, let me take a second and think about all the context that you just gave me. That kind of makes sense. And so I still want to vote for somebody differently, but I love you and I understand why you're making the voting you are. It changed. And so what happened for me was, you know, this notion that we're all more alike than different, fully ingrained onto my body. And that if you look at the core things we all care about, it's to care for someone else and be cared for ourselves. And also, retail is the front line of health. When you are looking for where real people are, they're not coming into the doctor's office. They're not, you know, signing into your ERG or your EAP or wherever you've bucketed this wellness stuff you're doing. They're out living their lives, panicking about the things that aren't going well. And I thought maybe the stuff that we tried with Archangels Take One that failed, we could actually try rolling out in the aisles of Walmart.
Okay.
So talk to us a little bit more about Archangels, right? Because I think to your point, your experience in Walmart, you learned a crap load. You know, you got many different perspectives, not just another one perspective, but probably hundreds and thousands. I don't know how long you stayed talking to people, but I also remember somebody talking about that you were just asking simple questions while people were checking out. And like, so maybe transition a bit, like what are you doing with Archangels and how that experience drove you to it even further with the...
So the first 8 months that I was at Walmart, I had not yet, we had not yet hatched how to roll this into Archangels Take Two. We were getting to it, we hadn't yet. And I really do believe, and Jim, I guarantee you feel this way too. I know Eugene does. You learn quickly that anybody on the street, anybody, if you stopped them, you could do an hour-long documentary on their life. Everybody is fascinating. And I will tell you, I would listen to these stories. Sometimes someone would be talking to me as a cashier. Sometimes they'd just be talking to the person behind them. And the sense of community, I think the more privileged you get, the more removed from society people become, the more layers of skin is the best way I can describe it, we add. And when you're in the aisles of Walmart, like somebody could turn around to somebody else and just say, oh, sorry about that. I forgot. Can you grab that for me? You know, my aunt has an opioid addiction and blah, blah, blah. And the person I'm like, yeah, I dealt with that too. How are you doing? Right. Enormous willingness to engage on the most foundational, important, elemental elements of life.
Right.
And so that sort of storytelling that emerges either because you observe other people sharing their stories or you just ask one follow-up question was enormously just validating caregiver stress, financial stress, relationship stress, workplace stress. And so many of the financial workplace relationship stress issues kept boiling down to caregiving, some issue around a caregiving challenge. Okay. And so Archangels Take Two is you can think of it as like a movement and it's a platform that's reframing how caregivers are seen, honored, and supported using a combination of data and stories. And you feel that dance, right? It's like it's movement, it's also a platform. It's data and it's stories. And I will also say that the channels that where we want to go find people is not just, if you think about the unpaid caregiver, a lot of them have to leave their jobs as of COVID, but even before. So if you're only looking for them, when they are employed or when they're covered, so you're selling to employers or health plans, you're missing a huge percentage. So how can we also be rolling out through townships, communities, faith-based organizations, states? So those caregivers who just as clearly need support, we're finding them. And I'll, just for context, because I know you guys are rabble-rousing entrepreneurs, market size matters. Our most recent data, 66% of the US right now, adults, says yes if you say, are you worrying about or caring for the health of a family member, neighbor, or friend? We published data with the CDC, 56% of unpaid caregivers have anxiety or depression. They're increasing their use of substances at 5 times the rate, and 1 in 3 have had suicidal ideation. And they're decreasing their use of the healthcare system. So they're the sickest and they're getting the least support.
Right,
So,
the actual caregivers, the caregivers.
Unpaid care, not the paid caregivers. So
Okay.
paid caregivers in my mind, doctor, nurse, tech,
Yeah.
Walmart cashier, that's a caregiver. They're caring for their community. Postal worker, paid caregiver. Daughter of insert my parents, neighbor, like anyone who's
Yeah.
taking on an unpaid role to care for somebody.
And
That's
And I'll be honest, I actually expected the 66%. I would have thought it's even higher. I mean, it's but I mean it's still an astounding number. But yeah.
So that's why I love you, because you're the only one who's ever said that. Most people are like, really? And I saw this number. And so Eugene, to build on that, you got to hear this. So 45% are men.
Sorry, I'll tell you why before I hold the 45% of men, because I'd love to hear that. But to me, it's like, I don't comprehend. I mean, every single person out there has family and friends, right? And so you are always caring about your family and friends. So that's why I'm kind of like 66, 2 out of 3. Like where's the other third, right?
I think the other third is somebody who either genuinely just doesn't realize what you just said, because that is true, and or their level of intensity, that's a term we use, your caregiver intensity, is just way lower right then, either temporally and it's going to flare back up, or because they have not, everyone in their family is healthy and they live in a healthy neighborhood, they're super privileged, right? That 1 in 3 suicidal ideation, where is it more? Black, Hispanic, Latinx, younger, essential workers. So there are populations for whom right now they're skirting by.
And so your platform is you're bringing people onto your platform. So maybe just for some context of like how people get involved with your platform.
Yeah. So and this is, Archangels Take One was trying to build a program for caregivers.
Okay.
And the problem was we couldn't get anybody to it because caregivers don't think they're a caregiver. They're just a son, just a brother, wife, husband, partner, whatever it might be. And the movement component of Archangels is we have to destigmatize and normalize who caregivers are. So our name is Archangels because people are confused over the term caregiver. And we believe that to the extent caregivers are our country's unsung heroes, they're archangels, and archangels are like warrior angels. They're like spreading their wings out over these people that they're caring for, and they're fierce ambassadors on behalf of this person. And so what we wanted to do was create aspiration. What we want to is create aspiration around this role. And back to that Eliza analogy, if somebody likes the term caregiver and they are responding to the email or the poster or the flyer or the social media thing that says, hey, caregivers, we see you and we love you, awesome. But to those who aren't, we're going to offer them a different persona. And all of our materials, if you look at them, they're designed really with like a biker in mind. We want a guy to be able to walk into a bar with an Archangels logo emblazoned on the back, and another guy to come up to him and say, dude, you're an Archangel? Yep. Me too. How you doing? Yep. You okay? Can I help? What's up? So it's pulling way back and saying, until we aspirationalize, glorify, recognize, and honor the sanctity of this role, we're not gonna get anywhere. And then once we've done that,
Sorry, and also destigmatize it, right? Because I think there are individuals that don't want to admit they're caregivers or are ashamed of it somehow. It's, you know, so I think it's a combination of all of those. It's do you have people doing tattoos, archangel tattoos?
I can't
You
tell you.
use the biker analogy, so I
No,
just, you know.
but actually we get questions like that all the time. The logo is cool. And the Archangels t-shirt, I think it's the first ever t-shirt that was designed to be worn under a Walmart vest. Has the
Right.
Walmart, has the Archangels logo here, has something on the sleeves, they're poking out. And then on the back, which is why people love to wear it after, has a big old logo on the back. But the interesting thing, so first you got to destigmatize and normalize. But then, Eugene, do you remember the vulnerability index, which was that data tool that we used to get somebody to sort of go through a series of questions?
Was it under Pew or no?
Susanna.
Yeah, Susannah. We need to have her on as well, by the way.
Oh my God.
Shout out to Susannah.
Susanna Fox. So we did it with Wendy Lynch, but it was basically a series of questions that very short, very quick, that when you got to the answer, you got a score, and that score validated for you how hard things were and then told you what to do about it. So Jim, fast forward, the caregiver intensity index just built on all that learning. So we're basically measuring for a caregiver in a very short set of questions, the level of intensity that they're experiencing that manifests in a score, and they're green, yellow, or red. And then it talks about what are the things that are driving that intensity, the biggest loads, and what are the things that are creating the greatest resiliency, top two on each. And then it crosswalks you over based on the tagging of the answers to the resources that exist under your EAP. There's an ERG, there's a benefit design, there's a coach that most people, especially caregivers, have no idea exist. So we don't build the resources, we get people to the resources. That's our raison d'etre.
Yep.
Lovely.
So, and I don't want to compare it to some of the health navigators, but you're, in a way, you're trying to help caregivers and navigate their daily struggles, their daily routines. What do I do for X, Y, Z? Who do I talk to? How do I handle, the next appointment with so-and-so? Or I'm making this up.
Well, what you're saying, in a perfect world, like I die in heaven right now, like I'm done. Everybody in the US has a navigator. And my job is not to be the navigator. At Archangels, our job is to get you to that navigator in that moment. Like we had a series of caregiver crises. We've all had them. One in particular this past summer where I got a call from somebody who's caring for my dad. And they said, your dad's about to get admitted to the hospital. And I realized that we had put in place elaborate plans that my dad lives in Austin, Texas. If he got COVID, like what we would do, we would drive, we would get him, we would not let him go to the hospital. We forgot, my dad's 80, guess what? You can have a heart attack, you can have a stroke. And so in that moment, I got the call because I thought he was having a heart attack. I didn't know what to do. And I work in the space. And I literally, like, blood drained from my face. You know who I called? I called Lisa Suennen.
Oh, really?
She was my red phone. I called Lisa because I didn't know what to do. I was walking around in my office in a tight little circle, hyperventilating, crying. Like, I can't think. I don't know what to do. Everybody in the US needs a red phone. So my job is to know you're in the red and get you to a red phone, whatever that red phone may be.
Right. And so who are you trying, like right now, your agenda with Archangel, like, are you trying to get more people to become aware of the platform? Is it, just some sense of like, what's your...
Jim, we are going to change the world. Okay. The way we're going to do that is we're going to call these beautiful souls, we're going to give them away. People talk a lot about making caregivers self-identify. We got to help caregivers self-identify. I don't think so. That's another job for the caregiver. They don't need a job. It is our job as an environment, as a community, as an ecosystem, to create ground that is so fertile with caregiver awareness that it's not for me to have to say, hey, everybody, I'm a caregiver. Can you help me? Or let alone have to go navigate through like list fatigue. I want to create a culture that somebody who knows me is like, babe, you're in the red right now. You don't know what that means, but I do. Here, do this quickly, or I'm just going to connect you right to Susanna Fox. What does she teach us, Eugene? Peer-to-peer. You know what you need, Alex? You need someone else who's insert what's going on for you, the person you're caring for. I'm going to connect you to them. So truly,
It's almost like
that's what we're going to do.
it's almost like an instantaneous neural network of individuals that can help at moment's notice based on the question that you have, right? So,
And it could be an individual, or in some cases, it could be actually all they really needed was just to know I wasn't alone. I'm okay for now. It
Right.
could be actually what I really want to do is sift through. I'm embarrassed talking to somebody still because I just don't want to talk about things personally. So what I want to do is watch videos about someone else's experience. What I want to do is answer a series of clinical questions about my mother's, whatever it might be. So the resources themselves, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
Our job is just to make sure that the tagging we have and what we're doing crosswalks over to how those resources are tagged and learns and learns and learns.
So how do you, and I'm curious if you've had discussions with like Esther Dyson, right? The way to Wellville, and I'm sure, right? Because I think there's so much in that happens locally within your 5-block radius in the community, right? And so I feel like the Archangels and the way to Wellville, as those experiments keep spreading, this is, to me, is almost like the perfect marriage to a certain extent.
No, I'll marry.
And I'm not
Esther.
trying to merge you guys.
I'll marry you right now, Esther. I love her. A, B, she's the smartest of all of us, right? Like she started doing Wellville. And what I love the most about what she did about it is she recognized no one's going to invest in it because there's no short term, there's no up and to the right, this will save us. No, it's a slog. If you really want to change something foundationally and culturally, community-based, which is the only way any of these things are actually going to change long-term. It's not an app on its own. It's not a, this on its own. It's you got to get in there and you got to learn the people. You got to earn their trust and you got to find a way to scale what therefore feels unscalable, but is if you go back at those core tenets. And Wellville creates a situation where the community gets to speak for itself about what it wants to fix. And Wellville helps you organize that so that because people naturally, we call it pushing a rope. If you like swoop into a community and say, oh, you're so cute, community, you're all overweight, we're going to fix you. No one gets behind you and nothing changes. You do what Esther did and you go in and say, what community, what's getting you out of bed in the morning? What is your heart tearing to do? We're going to help you do that. Oh, it's you're worried about the level of childhood malnutrition or which is manifesting in early stage diabetes. We're going to help you with that. Esther starts there. And then she starts roping in by finding financial strings. One of the other things, we got to start getting this stuff that everybody calls public health into the main domain. It's not public health. It's not an other. It needs to be, the way we scale and sustain it is it needs to be paid for. It needs to be on a line item in a budget that somebody pays somebody for it because it returns. There's a return on it. And Esther, everything she's building with an eye towards how could I make this scalable when it starts at an N of 1 locally.
Awesome.
So much to unpack. I do have one question because you said something earlier. Retail is the front line of health, right? And I'm actually curious on what your thoughts are. And we've seen everything being digitized, tele everything, ordering. And I'm sure at some point, people are coming back to the stores, et cetera. But to your point, you stood in Walmart and you literally touched people, right? And exchanged a credit card or whatever it is. And where is the post-COVID world in the tele versus the front lines being the retail in your mind?
I think it's an and. I mean, I think one of the things, I'll give an example that's making me crazy right now, which knits a lot of what we're talking about together, right? Access, telehealth, all the way through to reimbursement. So one of the things that I think makes me want to cry is when a whole room full of people get super excited about hospital at home. I agree. On paper, hospital at home is super sexy, right?
Mm.
And for some people, those individuals who have a home that's ready for it, who have digital access that's paid for, that's big enough for it,
Right.
and who want to do it.
Right.
And they can do it because they don't have a full-time job that in going to is the only way they're supporting the having of this roof. And so for me, when I think about, you know, whether it's in person or digital, paid for by a state or an employer or health plan, what matters the most is understanding what is that environment that you're trying to influence capable of doing, wanting to do, able to do in more than 1 day or 2 days. And if you just take someone from the hospital and dump them into a house, there are long-term repercussions of that does that unpaid caregiver now have to quit their job? Maybe you gave them 3 days of a home care aide, but not 20, and the home care aide's only during the day. Well, what about if I have to get up all night? So you covered me during the day, but I got to do it all night. I got to quit my job again. So for me, Eugene, it's digging into those details of let's look at something everyone's excited about, like hospital at home, and let's push on it and say, yes.
And what does it mean to the surroundings and the family and friends and everything else? Yeah.
Yeah. And the home
Jim,
is, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
The home is such a, like, it's such a fluid environment, you know, and, you know, this idea, like it's easy in a boardroom to describe the home as, you know, everyone pictures their own home and, you know, in a certain environment with a certain level of maybe even like people involved in it. And, you know, having built up companies in that space before, it's so fluid, it's so heterogeneous that you don't know what you're walking into, and you have to kind of like, you almost have to stay in order to, like anything you do in healthcare, if you deliver healthcare, you have to stabilize the environment you're in order to be able to protocolize it and do it efficiently. And the home, you're constantly set in an environment of like not knowing what you're entering into, and it changes, you know.
So
Jim, I know. No, go ahead.
The call I was just on before, Marcus was on it too, and there was a group of other people, and everybody was talking about a household and supporting a household. And in their mind, what became clear is everybody was thinking of there's a mama, there's a papa, and there's kids.
Right.
And you work at Walmart, you know that's not the norm. And you look at the data. So Marcus shared the data. So parental with kid households is down insane amounts. But what's doubling is single parent households with kids or multiple family households. So if the view you have in your head, that's doubled too. So if the view you have in your head is, I'm designing my beautiful, delicious, super sexy app and this, because that's going to go to the mama and the papa and the kids. Like, no, that's not what's happening. It's a wildly different, and that's especially true with LGBTQ. It's especially true with Black. It's especially true with Hispanic, Latinx. So I think that, Jim, that's a very important point, that you got to break out of this mindset of what it is.
Right.
And Jim, you know, I'm a timekeeper here because we can truly pull a Tim Harris on this for 2 hours. But first comment to you, Jim, you should definitely do your board meetings in your glasses. Even though you say the same thing, you just sound very much smarter. just FYI.
Very handsome, very attractive.
I was fishing for a compliment.
Do you want to do your
no, so listen, so right now, having, like, I love your experience, unbelievable. Started off watching your dad do angel investments all the way through your building your own companies and ARCHANGELS, and I haven't met anyone that went back in life to do the Walmart cashier job. Just amazing. What's your advice to the healthcare startup that just come through the last year right now? Where do they need to focus?
And I think this is especially true if somebody's raised a lot of money. I think it's easy to believe our own narrative. And it's hurtful to have people crap on what you're thinking. And so I would say, get real people to pay real money, whether that's an individual or it's an employer or it's a health plan, do not believe that just because you have money in the bank. The ideas we had for Eliza early on, every single one of them did not fly. The only reason we figured out what did fly is because we had no alternative, because we had no money. And when I think about Archangels, it's the same thing. Like our super adorable, very clever, looked great on the whiteboard ideas for Archangels didn't work. So what do? We just keep going and going and going. And so I think, and I would also say, I don't believe that everything is up and to the right. And I don't believe that scaling fast is the only way to go. And I think that to some extent, there's the fact that 4 people in the US right now have more money than the bottom 50% of the population. The fact that I just have to say bottom 50%, like then half of the country, I think is unsustainable. I think this is where people begin to really crack. And so I would say, if you're not exposed on a regular basis to people who are not as privileged as we all happen to be, get exposed, get raw, see if somebody really wants to pay you their money, not use your money. And that's going to hurt your feelings, but that's okay, because it is through that process that you will figure out what real people actually do want to pay for, and not just once, but multiple times.
Real people paying real money. That's awesome. Good advice.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Look at that. I even used the little heart thing.
Yeah.
Alex, was such a pleasure. Thank you so much. It was spontaneous and meticulously unproduced as always.
I just wish I could ask you guys 100,000 questions about what you're doing, because I think I'm like, this is boring for me, but I know what you guys are doing. Again, these are my, like, I prepared. I have notes for you guys. Like, we will follow up so I can ask you.
We'll absolutely catch up. Sounds
Absolutely.
good.
Thank you,
And
Alex.
to all the listeners and viewers, hit that subscribe button and spread the love and scars.
Spread the love and scars, baby. Absolutely.